World Cup, do you mean the event that got announced just before a very unfortunate global pandemic and then we never heard from again? Surely not.
Yeah, I mean, look, honestly, we could probably lead straight into that, to be honest, because it's a good talking point.
No, we've got it written down.
We do have it written down.
Well, I wrote it down.
Yeah.
You're lazy.
Yeah, I brought it up though in the podcast. That's the main thing. It's a good talking point because obviously, again, for me having history in PUBG, we have essentially what is known as the PUBG Nations Cup. Very, very much a prominent event on the calendar for PUBG esports. It's probably the most loved tournament, even more than the PUBG World Championship, which is akin to Six Invitational. So, I mean, that's quite something. And when I kind of look at the way that it's done, and every time you see the flags and the countries and all the players, you also get to see that almost like fantasy world where certain players are playing with each other that are on different teams. And I think that's something that Siege could definitely benefit from. Imagine like a couple players from Bliss, a couple players from Wildcard, maybe the best player from a Circular Spheres, for example, for Team Australia, because there typically, at least for these events, are limits to it. You don't just send like a team of 5. There has to be some kind of limit. I think for Siege it would be like 2 max per team, for example, just so one team doesn't just completely dominate it.
Yep.
And I think you can have a lot of fun with it, and that's the way it would need to be. At least that's the way I think it should be. Fun. It doesn't need to be SI. It doesn't need to be a major.
Yep.
Let it breathe. Let it be a little bit of fun. And I think obviously the players that get to go, they should obviously get a lot out of it. There should be that prize pool. There should be a reason to want to go outside of just the travel. The biggest thing is, what do the orgs get out of it? Well, not a lot, honestly. That's the biggest detriment to these things. PUBG Nations Cup, there's no org involvement, essentially, at all, because it is well and truly nations. So does this mean the orgs would kick back on it?
Just get their governments to back them, send them on diplomatic missions. No, I'll get into that in a second. I just want to take a step back. I think the World Cup, maybe this is an exaggeration, but I think it could single-handedly really bridge the gap between the casual and the pro community of Siege, because 8 years now, it has been fragmented. The casual and the ranked community alone, the stats were published, is already fragmented enough. I was shocked. I think it's like 40% of the player population plays ranked, maybe even less. I think it spiked with rank 2.0, but it is low. So that's already a minority in the community, even playing the most competitive mode available outside of comp. You shred that number again, you've got the amount of people playing the game competitively and arguably the amount watching it. An event like the World Cup instantly in my mind springs the Overwatch World Cup, which obviously you would have been following at the time you casted Overwatch. Yep. I think of the XQCs. That is still a huge storyline that's brought up and is still, prominent in his community and the Overwatch community. It's storylines like that I think can be really, really exciting. Is it going to be the most prestigious, high-quality Siege in the world? No, but it doesn't fucking need to be. And I'm so sick of that mentality of Siege having to be, right, this like perfect game and people watch it for the perfection and the art and the strategy and all this bullshit. It can be a glorified, fun, ranked event with the top players, the players that have the most pulse with social media, marketability. It would be a great event. Does it need to be long? Does it need to be a huge investment? No. Condense it down to like a 3-4 day LAN if you really have to. Limit the amount of nations that go. I think it would be a great fun event. It would really slot in so nicely in between stage 1, stage 2. People would be, excited about the game again instead of the subreddit being dead and people not really giving a flying fuck about the esport program at the moment. Did I go in too hard?
I think that might be our cold open for this episode. Honestly, that was brutal. That was honest, and that was no bullshit. That's what we like here. But I agree wholeheartedly with you on that. I think that again, not everything has to be about the pinnacle of like, oh, this is the best Siege, right? Fuck the best Siege. I mean, Red for Northception was not the best Siege. It was still entertaining at the Copenhagen.
Look, I know we casted it, but it was probably quite literally one of the more entertaining games during that entire phase. Like,
entertaining, maybe not for all of the right reasons, but it was still entertaining nevertheless. And I think that's something you can get out of a World Cup. Yeah, you're not going to have the same synergy levels that you're going to see from those top teams, but I think you can still end up in a situation where you get some good Siege. A lot of the top players are still going to be playing it anyway, right? Because like realistically, if it's a World Cup, the best players are there. That's the whole point of it. However they kind of get in, there's many different metrics as to voting, either decided by...
It had like a manager system that was originally tabled.
I think so. At the moment, the way that PUBG Nations Cup does it, for reference, is it's a player vote.
Right.
From within your own region, you put the player vote to that region. So for Team Australia, it would be the Oceania League. All the players would put together a vote. Obviously, you have a cap, 2 per team, and that's how it gets sorted out. And that's why it is by the players, for the players, and then in turn, hopefully for the viewers a
And
little bit.
well, I mean, not to harp on too much, but you have a system like that, then you have the players that aren't even attending the event that would be genuinely engaged. They would give a shit about this.
Well, at
You
least
have watch parties, you have
somewhat.
engagement. Yeah, they'd care about it to an extent. Obviously, not as much as those that are in attendance, but yeah, I think it would have a really nice flow-on effect. And look, you mentioned the orgs, and what do they get out of this? And unfortunately, esports is a small world, walls talk. There seemed to have been a lot of pushback from orgs when this event was proposed. Is that why it got sent to the grave? I have no idea. It was probably more so to do with the pandemic and other investments and whatever.
Yeah.
But that was really disappointing to hear. I get it. Your org's name and brand and the sponsors associated with that may not be prevalent on the broadcast or on the socials or whatever. But the opportunity that this kind of event provides to build up your players, which is something that is so incredibly overlooked by 99% of orgs that whinge about this shit anyway, I think is critical. And I think it is very, very short-sighted and plays into the short-sighted mentality of esports for orgs to write this off and say, well, our branding isn't on this. We don't want this. We want our players to scrim for 3 months straight. That would be better.
I agree. I don't know how it gets done. I don't know.
A lot of political willpower from Ubisoft.
and the reason why I say that is because if you are to do it, it already probably needs to be in the planning for next year.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's still a big event. There's a lot that has to go into it.
Maybe they'll just tune into this podcast and be like, yeah, we should add that to next year's calendar.
Someone at Blast or Ubisoft.
If the World Cup gets re-announced next week,
mate,
we better be casting it.
And I agree. It doesn't have to be a long spectacle. Typically these kind of things.
How long's Nations Cup?
Like 3 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Siege is a bit different because obviously
Obviously you don't have
a couple more
it's not
teams,
BR,
needs
but-
eliminations, yada yada yada, right? So, and another part of it is how many teams do we even invite? That's actually one thing that's typically controversial. What countries actually get invited? How many do you have?
do qualifiers and stuff. They do that for Overwatch. Just do it here. Done.
You could. How do you do the qualifiers? I guess are you saying like in Europe, European countries all play? Blah, blah?
Yeah, I mean, you could. I don't know if there needs to be a limit as to what countries can play in an open qualifier, but you have some kind of system where those teams are created and compete.
I think that,
and you have some that have direct invites where the most popular countries are. Done.
Well, the issue with that is then, let's be honest, because you're not going to be putting on an APAC LAN. Japan gets an auto invite, Korea gets an auto invite, Australia probably gets an auto invite, right? And so you kind of end up in this situation. Then it's like, well, why does certain teams from EU not get auto invites? Why do we have to play in these qualifiers? So look, that's
we just rank it on, most popular.
There's definitely ways to do it. I will say
where the game
we
is played
probably
or
don't
something.
have enough time or honestly even knowledge about it, but there are ways to actually understand which regions.
We'll work on our notes before we pitch that to the CEO of
We'll
Ubisoft.
send that one off.
Yeah.